now, and let me say welcome to the second virtual chapter meeting for the Durham chapter of NARFE. And what I've got on my screen, can everybody see what looks to be two static images? Here, one shows my my stoic face here. And I just wanted to mention that's the settings, so it allows you to go and adjust whatever you use. Then the next one over is a cartoon bubble type thing that allows you to enter a message here, send it to anybody or everybody, or pick a particular person, send it, and it'll appear up here, and you can have a chat back and forth. The next one here, when you hit it, will come up and display people's pictures, and also it'll show a microphone icon. And then the last one, shows a picture of all the attendees, and you can see my stoic face here again. But you can't see what I see here because sometimes it goes over the picture. It's a technical thing, but anyway, that's kind of a snapshot, and you can click this button right here if you see it, and it'll remove the pictures and it allows you to move them off to the side. So that's a little bit different between this and maybe some of the some of the things that people will see when they have a Mac.
So could we just then begin? I'll call the meeting to order. We'll start with a moment of silence. Then do we have a flag, Pete?
Hang on just a second here. Yes, we do. And it's coming on up.
So let's have our moment of silence now, and then we'll do the pledge.
Okay, a sec here. It's coming on up. I think, yeah, here we go. All right.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Justice for all.
I would like very much to welcome all of our chapter members and any national only members who may have decided to join us. And we don't do this often, but we thought this is an important enough topic that affects all of us, and that we have included national members only also today. So with that, I'd like us to start with the legislative report from Nancy Mayer.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to make this pretty short. Let me turn the camera back on so you can see me, at least for this. Whoop. It's not. There I am. Wait. There I am. Okay. Hi, everybody. Wish I could see your smiling faces, but I can only see some of them. Okay. Here's what I have on the federal level. Agencies are returning back to work. They're trying to do safety. The IRS is one of the first to return because they have to process our tax returns. So they were the first to return. No one quite knows what it looks like. If you're interested in EPA, I understand that looking at might be able to be called back the middle of June, but they haven't been called back yet. The federal fundings and U.S. Post Office funding is the sticking point for the next relief bill. So it's federal benefits, and there's post office. You know, you're hearing about the post office going under, and so that's what's holding up the next relief bill. Zero retiree COLA is likely for 2021. Prices are going down primarily because prices of fuel have gone down. You know, the gas prices have gone really low, and so it looks like we're not going to have a COLA for next year. So that's what I have on the federal level. Going into the state, Governor Cooper has moved us into stage 2, calling it, rather than stay at home, is now called safer at home. Retail is open at 50% capacity, mass gatherings up to 10 indoors, 25 outdoors, worship services or whatever the worship people want to do. Restaurants, salons, etc., 50% plus restrictions. Bars, indoor entertainment, gyms are all closed. No visitors at long-term facilities. Summer camps are open. Sports allowed with social distancing, which means there'll be no football, soccer, basketball, etc. In the county, in Durham, North Carolina, we've adopted the same thing, except we still have a stay-at-home order that's in place indefinitely. They have the same thing on retail, but it's 50% plus social distancing if they can do delivery. So that includes curbside delivery. Still need to keep your face covered, everybody, when you can't do social distancing. Mass gatherings, none inside and no more than 10 outside. Worship, once again, whatever the religions want to do. Restaurants only open for delivery and takeout until June 1st. Barbers, salons, and personal care are closed until June 1st, 8 a.m. So you might want to make your appointment now, 8 a.m. in the morning. You'll be the first one getting it. Summer camps, Durham public schools have closed all summer camps. Others can open June 1st. Sports allowed with social distancing, the same as the state. And once again, no visitors at long-term care facilities. Then you have Orange County requirements. They are also requiring people to wear face coverings in restaurants, personal care, grooming, tattoo, recommending all business required customers to wear face covering. Tables at restaurants are limited to no more than 6 people. The state law allows up to 10. Clarifying that meetings of public bodies such as elected or appointed boards are limited to no more than 10 people indoors. Worship services, whatever they want. Mass gatherings, the executive order maintains a limit of 10 people, 24 for outdoor gatherings, no bars, bowling alleys, etc. open. The order allows for indoor and outdoor swimming pools to open, but not in Durham. Durham's closed most of their pools for the summer. The order allows public parks and trails to be open, and the individual groups cannot exceed a limit of 25 for outdoor mass gatherings. Playgrounds remain closed, including those in public parks. So you've probably read about those, but that's sort of a brief summary of what you're going to do. As I said, Durham's stricter than the state, as is Orange County, which I think are the only 2 places we mostly go. If you go to Wake County, all of a sudden things will be freer. Does anybody have any questions? If not, I'm done.
Thank you very much, Nancy, and good luck with your course coming up.
Yeah, guys, I'm taking a class on pro bono law so I can start helping on Friday. We're having call in a lawyer. So if you have any questions for lawyers, you can do it on Friday morning.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I think that Jane can begin her presentation. Jane has requested that she introduce herself, so we're going to let her do that. Please start, Jane.
Well, I didn't want to spend, can everybody hear me well? Because I have pretty good microphone set up here.
Set the speaker thing.
Coming in very well.
Okay, and my voice, as people who worked with me for years know, carries about 3.5 miles. That's just how that is. If I get to be too loud, say something.
Okay, let me interrupt here. Sometimes we get a lot of background noise. So what I like, if people can see the green microphones, if you can click on the green microphones to turn them red, that will reduce a lot of the background noises. So I know that some of you don't have, there you go, Frank, good.
Peter, you just muted yourself.
Yep, okay.
I did today's presentation. I have 25 slides. I'm not going to read through all the words of 25 slides. The reason you have this is I wanted to develop a resource document for you that explains some of the science, some of the terms that you're going to hear thrown around in newspapers. And at the very end, there are 2 pages of links to places where you can get trusted and digestible science information. Things are going really fast in the newspapers and in the news, and it can be overwhelming and scary and a bit confusing. So that's why I wanted to do this presentation today. A little bit about me of like, well, who am I to talk? Well, if you look at the first slide, that's my little bio piece that says I'm retired. Thanks, Peter. And you see this page of, you know, my education and my employment and the teaching. And the bottom line is I have a really broad scientific background. I've produced science, clinical and basic. I've interpreted science. I've applied science to risk assessment. And I've translated that science for the public and for decision makers, and basically looking at the risk to human health and environmental things. But in this broad background I have, I've had to really become an expert in a lot of things, and especially in interpreting the lit and looking at the science and what's the truth, what do we know and what don't we know. So the things I want to talk about today, testing. You hear so much about it, why it's so important, what kind of tests are they, what can they tell us, why is this virus so tough to contain, who's most at risk, vaccine and therapeutic development. Everybody knows what a vaccine is, that you get some dose of a weakened pathogen and your body can recognize it again and fight it off, and you don't get the full-blown disease. Therapeutic development, those are drugs and different types of treatments. So not only do we want to prevent you from getting the disease, but if you get the disease, you want to have effective treatments so that you get over it more easily and you don't have a really bad outcome. I want to talk about the vaccine timelines, uncertainties, and the money, and a little bit about the information roller coaster that you see in the news, why scientists are cautious about some of these preliminary reports, and we'll have, you know, a vaccine by this time and that time, and why there's some optimism and caution there. And again, that really important thing at the back, which is resources and links. The major scientific magazines like Lancet, Journal of the American Medical Association, and Science, Nature have they're letting access to their journals be free to articles, and especially the news parts about COVID, to try to, this is a real different time for scientists too, where we don't have the usual wait months and review. Anything that has to do with COVID, yes, it's curated by the editors of those journals to be decent, but they want to put things out as quickly as possible to help people collaborate. So testing. Well, the first test is, do you have the test right now? Peter Backlund, do you have the test right? Do you have COVID right now? And that's a test that looks to see if you're shedding the virus, if you got RNA in your nose. That's as they say, the swab up your nose that's tickling your brain scenario you see. They want to know, do you have it right now? Real-time PCR tests, they're sort of the gold standard. They amplify the RNA of the virus, and they make it makes it more sensitive and specific, but this takes hours to perform. It has to be in the lab. That's not an instant response. You have rapid point of care tests, which have been developed, that you can look and screen lots of people. These are the ones that are the 15-minute ones. They're not as sensitive. They can give false negatives, but if you're trying to screen a lot of people, that can be helpful. Now, you hear about the antibodies tests, and those are serology tests to see, like, did you have it a month ago or some weeks ago, and you're over it now? We want to, have you already had the virus? There's two main tests that are used. I won't go into that, but as April 24th, only 4 tests had been preliminary reviewed by the FDA. And again, this is because of the emergency we're in. FDA is not doing its usual very, very rigorous standards for tests to get an FDA approval. And there were a lot of tests out on the market at one time, and you really didn't know whether they were any good or not. So I think FDA has given a preliminary stamp of approval to 4 of them as April 24th. Next slide. So what are the limitations of an antibody test? Well, an antibody just means that you were exposed and your body reacted to it, and it made antibodies to it. But it doesn't tell you if you're immune. What happens is that your immune system has gone through a series of steps, and it can remember this virus or this pathogen. So if it sees it again, it can mount a really good response and strong response and get rid of the pathogen and not let it go amok in your body and cause disease. Now, some people don't make much or any antibody. If you're immune suppressed, and some of the may not work. So it's all over the literature of whether you're going to be able to make an antibody or not. And there are questions about, well, you were asymptomatic. Did you have the same kind of response with antibodies than somebody who got sick with this thing? Antibody tests need to be validated. As I mentioned before, some of the antibody tests that were first used, the manufacturer may have said it's 95% specific and it's very sensitive, but recent a study by California scientists looked at it with a gold standard and basically said, well, it said it was supposed to be 95% sensitive, but it was only 67. And these antibody tests, they were, even with a 95% specificity and sensitivity, if you have a really low number of people in the population that have it, that's called an infection rate that's real low, then the test can give you false positives. And the more people that you test with it, the better answer you can get that the antibody test is giving you an accurate picture. Next. So what about when do these tests work? Well, this is after you've had symptoms, that you're one of the symptomatic people that actually get sick. The PCR tests work really well for about 2 weeks after you've gotten symptoms. And then as your virus load tends to go down, then those tests tend to reflect that there's, well, we don't detect it anymore. But you may not have live virus that you can give to somebody, but your body hasn't cleared all those virus particles out. They're not the whole virus, but there's remnants of the virus in your body, and that can go on for a month. And that's important because, well, when you look at somebody who tests positive and then negative and then positive, Well, they may not be reinfected. They just maybe never cleared the virus particles out. So those first couple of weeks, that test is more accurate. That says you've got virus in your body after the onset of symptoms. Now, what about the antibodies? Well, they don't really get cranking until about 3 weeks after the onset of symptoms. So yeah, some people can have antibodies, week 1 or 2 after the onset of symptoms, but they're more accurate 3 to 4 weeks. And again, none of them are 100%. And again, this is a study that looked at, we know that this is a confirmed person, they have symptoms, they have PCR, they've got coronavirus. Now let's test them a month out. And look at when did they develop antibodies. And so you have these two curves of the virus going down and antibodies going up. So the bottom line, the kind of test that you do and when you do it is going to help determine whether it's accurate, whether it can tell you that you've got it right now or you had it. If you test too early for anybody, you may miss. If you test too late for the virus itself, it may have cleared. So it's when you test. Next. So you've heard about, well, can we use these antibody tests and I'll just get an immunity passport. And if I've had the thing, then I can go back to work. I won't give it to anybody. I won't get it again. And so now I'm safe to go back to work. Well, why is that not such a great idea? Well, that assumes that once I've had the virus, that I'm immune.
Jane, let me interrupt you for a sec. I think we're getting a little bit of feedback from your speakers into what you're saying. So if you could maybe turn down the volume of your speaker just a little bit, that might help.
Okay, let me do that. Is that better?
Yes, I muted myself. Yeah, yeah, that's sounding better. Thank you very much.
Okay, yeah, I can do that. Okay, I'm gonna. I turned it down just a little bit. Let me know if I'm feedbacking again. So why is this immunity passport not such a great idea? Well, you may have had the virus, but that doesn't mean you can't get it again, because we don't know yet. With SARS and MERS, which are related viruses, I'm turning my speakers down. Can you hear me still?
Well, you're coming in fine. I see a bunch of green microphones, and it'd be nice if everybody could click once on their microphone just to mute. Let's see. Let me try something.
Yeah, I turned my speaker down a little bit on my computer so to help with the feedback.
Okay. That's sounding pretty good right now. So we'll go on with this, and I'm muting myself.
Okay, so back to the poor immunity passport. So the theory, again, if you don't have immunity, and SARS and MERS, there was, when they tested, these are related coronaviruses, they saw some immunity at 3 years, up to 3 years, but we don't know yet. As you know, with the flu vaccine, that immunity lasts 6 months. We don't know what natural immunity, how long that will last, and we certainly don't know what the immunity of a vaccine would get. So that's an issue. If you've got false negatives or positives, that may give you, you may say that somebody's immune, that's not. There's a potential for fraud, like I want to go back to work, so I'm going to get this passport fraudulently made so I can do that. And some people may say, well, what if I just go ahead and get this thing and then I'll be immune and then I can go back to work? Well, if you do that, you're putting yourself at risk and everybody else you come in contact with, including the healthcare workers. So what about this herd immunity? Will it solve the need for a lockdown? And the theory is that, well, you've got this population, whether it's people or buffaloes, and let the strong ones survive in the herd, and the weak ones will die off, and the herd will be stronger. And some have cited this as Sweden's approach of like, let's not shut everything down. Let's just let it run through the population and everybody who get it, and then we'll somehow protect the rest of us. Well, there's a problem with that. Well, first of all, and WHO is the World Health Organization, humans are not herds. And letting a certain portion of the population die off to protect the overall health of the herd is not acceptable. To get high levels of immunity to prevent from future outbreaks, this thing is very contagious. And because of that, you need 50 to 70% of everybody to have had it in order to have herd immunity. And, or you have to have a large number of people get a vaccine to protect from future infections. Now, even in areas where there have been high infection rates and where the hospitals have been overwhelmed and all of things that you have seen on TV, in Wuhan, only 2 or 3% of the population was affected. Spain, 5%. New York, estimates 21%. So most of the population is still susceptible. And again, as I've said before, we don't know whether the antibodies that you either have naturally from exposure to this or from a vaccine are going to give you immunity and how long it lasts. And if natural immunity is only 3 to 6 months, herd immunity doesn't work. So that, I sort of explained that. Can you get the virus twice? You read in the May 2020, there were 14 sailors on the U.S. Roosevelt that tested positive after recovering from a previous infection. And as the CDC said, detection of viral RNA does not necessarily mean that infection is present. You can have some leftover virus hanging around. So why is the virus so tough to contain? Next slide. Well, people can get infected and don't know it. Several studies have come out that have said that, well, 50% of the people who had virus on board didn't show symptoms yet. These asymptomatic people can carry the same viral load. And just, are people going in and out or something? I'm hearing a beeping. Is there an issue? Peter, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, it looks like something with the Kingsley's going in and out or something. Let's see. Okay, I think we've stopped it here. All right.
Okay, I just want to make sure there's not a problem.
Well,
Okay, I can continue on.
okay. Oh, excuse me. It was wasn't Kingsley's. It was looks like Kay Howard. Okay, I think we're set here.
Okay, so why is this virus so tough to contain? Again, people can be infected and they don't know it. The people that are asymptomatic carry a viral load. They are just as infectious as the symptomatic ones. And this is really uncommon. Usually when people have the flu or they have a cold, if you've got a fever, you can spread it. If you don't, you won't. And that's not the case with this one. This one is a new virus, and maybe it's just your body doesn't recognize it yet. I don't know, but you can be asymptomatic and not show, but you can definitely give it to people. So just screening for symptoms, putting a thermometer up to your head is not going to be good enough to tell you whether you got the virus or not. And the virus has been in circulation early before we had testing and could test it, and it's all over the place. Now, I'll just insert something here. People have been asking, well, why can't I go to the gym or sing in church? And the problem is with the gym, and Dr. Mandy Cohen, who's the Secretary of North Carolina Health and Human Services, she is excellent, and she had a thing in the paper explaining it this morning. If you're in a gym and you're breathing heavily, you have more of a chance to spread this virus that's spread through the water droplets in your breath. If you're in a gym and you're exercising, you're less liable to have a mask on. So it makes it more of a high-risk area, not just the fact that you're having to sanitize the equipment, but it's just more of a risk. The same thing you're asked if you're at a church service, singing is a way to circulate the virus by putting out lots of droplets into the air that have the virus on it. So next slide. Questions, I think a lot of us, now this is the mortality one, a lot of questions have been asked about, well, who's at risk? And the two studies that have just come out, this is one slide before that, Peter. We have two big studies, one Meridol that looked at 15,000 hospitals in Asia, Europe, and North America. And then we have the registry of the National Health Service from UK. And they say some of the same things in different ways, but basically being older, being male. And this is the same for influenza and SARS and other viruses. Women have stronger innate and adaptive immunity, greater resistance to viral infection than men. This is the same for fruit flies, mice, and for men. There are theories that more of your men were designed more to reproduce, and women have better immune systems for other reasons. Coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, arrhythmias, COPD, that's chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, a current smoker. There was some concern that people who used ACE inhibitors for blood pressure would have increased mortality, but that's not what they found. And in the UK, older age male, I love the British, they call poverty deprivation rather than poverty. And uncontrolled diabetes, they broke it down for controlled and uncontrolled diabetics, and the uncontrolled ones is much higher risk. Severe asthma, they looked at mild asthma and severe asthma. People who have to do inhalers every day are more at risk. Respiratory diseases, obesity, and again, some of the things at the top are linked to the things at the bottom. And various and prior other medical conditions. Are you immune suppressed? Are you going through chemotherapy? Yada. And one thing that they found is Black and Asian ethnicity. And that was not due to poverty or economics, or they were able to separate out all these other factors, and they still saw there was an increase in mortality just because you have this ethnicity. And that's what you're seeing in the papers too, is that it's more affecting African Americans than Caucasian Americans. Again, the big one is older age, especially 80 and up, where you have a very large increase of who's dying. Next, the vaccine development. Now, this is really heavy-duty stuff, but you're going to see so much in the news and the literature about we've got this vaccine or that vaccine, and we've got all these different things we're trying. And if you look, and these are from a Nature article, so I'm not expecting, there will not be a quiz. I'm not expecting you to memorize all of this and all of the terms, but Nature does a really good job at digesting science into something that lay scientists and the layperson can understand. But the thing over to the right is how we develop immunity, and it's complicated. There are a lot of different cell types that have to talk to each other and try to fight the virus, and remember that the virus can attack the body, and if we ever see it again, let's mount a response. So you've got an array of vaccines. This virus is really not very complicated. It's got, they call it corona because, and I'm sure you've seen all this stuff, it's got these little spike proteins and proteins on the surface where it grabs onto these ACE receptors in the lung and other places, and it inserts its RNA in there, and it hijacks the cell and says, why don't you make my proteins and my RNA for me, and then after you've made a bunch of virus, I'll just pop out of the cells and kill your cell and make more virus. You know, the virus just looks at you as a great big growth medium. That's all it cares about. It's you know, like how can I spread, where I can go and make more of myself. So you want to trick the body into seeing this thing, but you want to make a vaccine where you don't get the thing. And so there's an array of vaccines. You look at the virus. The old way to do that is inactivate or weaken the virus and pop that thing in. And the virus can't infect you anymore, but the body can mount a response. The viral, you can use a viral vector. You can take another virus and put some of the RNA in it and have it replicate in there, and maybe that will be a way to trick the body. You can take the RNA, you can do the proteins. And so this thing on the left is like, this is the number of groups that are trying to do vaccines in development from either protein, you know, virus itself. This shows anywhere from, you know, 9 to 30 groups are trying each one of these different methods to try to do a vaccine. Next. Here's something I am not going to go through, but here are the different vaccine details of how you make all these things for those who want to. And this is a good reference slide, because when you hear about somebody's doing a viral vector of weakened virus, you can go back to this slide and you figure out who's doing it and how that works. But 70% of the groups that are doing these vaccine research development efforts are industrial and private firms. Most of them are saying, even accelerating all our steps, we hope to have a vaccine ready in 18 months. Next. So I want to talk about some more hopeful, how it's supposed to work stuff. As you trudge through all of the stuff in the news, that the U.S. didn't have any national process or private or public to try to figure out how to get an antibody or therapeutics developed. So on April 3rd, NIH and the NIH Foundation got a group of scientists together and decided that they would try to do a collaborative effort. They had, and one of the groups that's in charge of this is the Biomedical Advanced Research and Development Authority. That's BARDA. So when I talk about BARDA, you'll hear that again. Europe and academia. So there were 4 groups. That working groups they decided to do. One would have an NIH chair, one an industry co-chair. They put all sorts of federal agencies on this. They had Francis Collins of NIH and Paul Stoffels from Johnson & Johnson, the overall leads. And on April 17th, they formed something called ACTIVE, the Accelerating COVID-19 Therapeutic Intervention and Vaccines. Now, this has grown. It now has 18 biopharmaceutical companies. And ACTIVE is connecting with the FDA, BARDA, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the Wellcome Trust, the European Commission, the UK government, and the World Health Organization. So if you look at this partnership, this was published on May 18th, that's just last week, by Francis Collins and Paul Stoffels. They published in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, this is what we're doing. And we want to give you a progress update, and we want to tell you what we're doing. And again, you can look at the working groups, everything from how do you develop treatments and vaccines, but also how do you make sure your capacity is enough that you can produce the vaccines. That's a lot of little glass vials and a lot of syringes, as well as vaccines. So active progress, they have 170 therapeutics identified already. And a lot of this was funded by, I know Bill and Melinda Gates funded a lot of this work to try to look at things that may have a mechanism that would attack this virus that we've already got information on safety. They've gone from 170 to 39 and for review, and 6 agents, including immunomodulators and supportive therapies, are proposed for clinical trials beginning in late May. So a number of you have asked about, what about that stuff for hair lice, and what about this, and what about that, and Resmedier, not quite done yet. Back one, please, Peter. And so there's 6 that are ready for clinical trial. We have 14 networks identified for clinical trials, because even if you have something that you want to test, who are you going to test it on? You already have to have people in clinical trials that you can use the thing on. So their goal is the next vaccine candidates ready to enter phase 2 and 3 by July the 1st. Again, when we look at timelines, they again are saying 12 to 18 months. I really like the quote by Linda Gruszynski. Even under fast track conditions, finding an effective vaccine could be a year away. The main delay is scientists need to wait months to know how the body will respond to the vaccine, and you can't rush that. Now, the other thing is just like, I guess, a week in the life. On May 14th, Trump announces warp speed, and from what I can tell from this thing, it's not so much to leverage the science, but leverage the money in trying to get vaccine manufacturers well funded, and some have suggested to sort of put a marker down, well, we want your first 300 million of them. May 15th, Moderna announces that the guy that Trump put in as head of this is a co-consultant, Dr. Slaoui, and forgive me if I pronounce his name wrong, has resigned from their board, and he owns $10 million of stock. 2 days later, the British government's putting money into AstraZeneca's Oxford's vaccine. Collins and Stoffel published their active thing. It doesn't talk about Operation Warp Speed. It's talking about the science and how we get the vaccines developed. And then we get this May 18th press release, which is a Monday, that says, hey, our thing is looking really good. How would you like to buy some stock with us? We want to do a $1.34 billion stock sale. And their stock went up 900 points that Monday. Well, as the roller coaster continues, the next day, Stat News did a report questioning the significance of Moderna's press release, because Moderna didn't release their data. They just had a press release saying, blah, blah, blah. And Stat News said, wait a minute, not so fast. Well, but this Stat News thing came out at the end of the day, and the Dow went down 336 points, and Moderna's stock fell 9%. And Dr. Soy sold his shares in Moderna for a $2.4 million profit, which he's going to donate, he says. But you know, this is just moving so fast. So May 21st, AstraZeneca gets $1 billion from BARDA, that's us. And BARDA is the guy who is the organization, you know, that whistleblower that you know, said that he was being pressured to do hydroxychloroquine. Well, he was head of BARDA. That's where that date, you know, that sort of was familiar. So AstraZeneca agrees to supply 400 million doses of the vaccine and plans phase 3, 30,000 person clinical trial, blah, blah, blah. We're going to start that shortly. And AstraZeneca acknowledges, well, our vaccine may not work, but we're going to, you know, try. And so BARDA also provided funding for French, 2 other vaccines. And on May 22nd, Dr. Fauci, you know, had expressed cautious optimism about the Moderna vaccine and says it's conceivable the vaccine could be available by the end of the year if we don't run into things, as they say, unanticipated setbacks. But that's never a promise, and full results will be, you know, submitted to a journal. And one thing I'm sure of is that there will be infections in the fall and winter because it's not going to disappear. So you see so much in the news about that, you know, promises of like we can have this thing ready by the end of the year. The good news is the active process is got the people on the world working together on this. They all, in an unprecedented move, they all agreed that whoever gets there first, great. We're going to cooperate rather than compete on this. But on the other hand, you don't want to get the vaccine ready and then start trying to come up with the vaccine. People are trying to get money and things in place to help produce the vaccine once we get it. But, you know, these things just take time. So again, why are the scientists cautious about these preliminary press releases? And, you know, why did the, you know, stock market go down the next day on May 19th? Well, you know, they noted that Dr. Fauci hadn't said anything on Monday when Moderna was doing its stock option deal and doing a press release. And Dr. Fauci was silent. They had 45 subjects. They only reported 8 had antibodies. What about the other 37? There's no way to know how durable the response is they got. And Moderna has yet to bring product to market. It doesn't publish its work in journals. So that's, you know, Stat was pretty negative about, like, you know, what's going on with this. I go to Nature, which on May 19th, you know, had like that same day, that Tuesday now Moderna has its press release on Monday, and Nature comes out with a commentary on Tuesday and said, we've got 3 preliminary vaccine trial results that are being talked about. The Moderna one, the AstraZeneca Oxford one, and there's a Chinese vaccine. And the Chinese vaccine, they published their stuff in Science on May 19th. And what are the caveats with this? And again, why the scientists, we're optimistic, we're cautiously optimistic because there's just so much unknown with this. We're making steps in the right direction, but we've got a way to go. And again, they point out no one knows the precise nature of the immune response that will protect people from COVID-19. We don't know how long that immunity would last. All three of the vaccines are going into clinical trial. The early stuff is to see if it's safe, but we really need larger clinical trials to see if they actually work, that they protect us. And they could report those in the next few months. Again, they say we may have vaccines in the clinic that are useful within 12 to 18 months. This is one of the experts that Nature interviewed, Dave O'Connor from Wisconsin. But we're going to need to improve them and develop second and third generation vaccines. Moderna is going to start its phase 2 and hopefully for phase 3 by July. Oxford has enrolled 1,000 in their clinical trial. And specifically, you know, the Moderna vaccine, they talk about it in Nature, and they say, you know, small number, the mouse data is, you know, may or may not be as good as it looks. And so they have some of the same concerns that the stat did. The Oxford vaccine, they talk about that one. They gave that to monkeys and said, well, we gave it to monkeys and then we tried to reinfect the monkeys and the monkeys didn't get it. But the monkeys didn't get it in the lungs, they didn't get pneumonia, but they still had a lot of virus. And so is that just because we exposed them to a lot of virus the second time? Or is there just a lot of virus there? They're not getting sick from it, but can they give it to somebody? You know, because now they're sort of an asymptomatic monkey. Some more technical details. And then this Chinese vaccine from Sinovac. It is more of a weakened virus, more of a traditional one. And they've published their preliminary findings May 5th in Science. And it's promising, but it's got a way to go. I just will note that the Sinovac thing, you know, is going into clinical trial. Just today, there was press about another Chinese vaccine that's from the Academy of Military and Medical Science and the CanSino Biologics, which puts the vaccine, it takes a cold virus and then it modifies it so that it's COVID-like. And they've released preliminary stuff too, but I think that's a lower tier. But when you see Chinese vaccine, now there's another one out there, and it gets kind of hard to track all of this. So I wanted to touch real quick. There's been stuff about what did the Chinese let us know and not know. The source I really trust and that a lot of people have trusted is Johns Hopkins, and you've got the next slide here, and you've got the link on top, and it just gives like from when the Wuhan city started to trace cases all the way down, you know, like a span really of 2 months, 2.5 months of how fast things went there. And one of the things that the Chinese scientists did to help the world is as soon as they sequenced the data, they figured out it was a SARS-like coronavirus, and they released that genetic information so that the world could start working on therapeutics and vaccines. And that was extremely helpful for the scientists. But this is just, again, if you are interested in what were those timelines and reporting, I really recommend Johns Hopkins for a lot of things. People are using the Hopkins tracer for coronavirus spread all over the world. Now, what about hydroxychloroquine? Now, the New England Journal of Medicine May 14th update saw they had a study from that in a New York hospital. And they said don't use it outside of a clinical trial, and they removed it from clinical guidance because they were seeing reports of it wasn't helping and it was putting patients at risk. On Friday, just this Friday, the Lancet reported the results of a large trial, multinational analysis, and basically said, we can't confirm it's a benefit. And we've looked at the ways that people have given it, and it was increasing arrhythmias and bad outcomes. So both the Food and Drug Administration and the World Health Organization have warned against using it. It's typically prescribed for an autoimmune disease, but but using it for a COVID patient who's in shape, and or certainly to prevent it, that doesn't warrant use. And this weekend, the World Health Organization basically suspended hydroxychloroquine testing even in clinical trials, and basically because of the Lancet article. Now, you may have heard the VA stockpiled a bunch of this stuff and has given it to a large number of vets, and there have been questions about doing that, especially given what the FDA and the World Health Organization said about that. And I'm sure that will be more in the news of like, why are you giving this to people at the VA when you've been warned by your own administration about it? So I know I've blathered on a long time, more than I thought I would, but here's the real thing that I want you to take home with you. As you see so much stuff coming out, the American College of Occupational Environmental Medicine is a wonderful resource. They have in their resource page, and it's free, just links to all these different entities to get information. And they have a series of free webinars that are very, very good on personal protection equipment, how to safely go back to work. And they invite really well-respected authorities that are in the trenches on this to come and speak in these webinars. The NIH has a website where you can find things, and there's a PubMed and their preprints. They are, again, trying to accelerate the information exchange without having to wait 6 months for peer review. So there's spots where things that are just showing up every day. The World Health Organization is a wonderful resource. Again, I talk about Johns Hopkins University. The tracker and the resource there is what people are using. And again, these journals, Science, Nature, New England Journal of Medicine, and JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, they're letting their COVID articles, you can download these for free. And all of them have COVID resource pages and easily digestible reviews and commentaries on like what is new and how to interpret it and what's the good and bad news. So it's a real mix. It's the scientists, the good news, the scientists are collaborating. There's stuff in the pipeline. And it's going to take some time to see what we get from this. The early stuff is encouraging. I like cautiously optimistic, but it's going to take time, and COVID's going to be with us for a while. On a personal note, again, when you talk about what to do about this for your personal protection or whatever, I did want to mention, and Tom's here, is this was recommended some time ago, is to get an oximeter. It's an oxygen meter that you stick on your finger, and it tells you what your saturated oxygen is. Because if you do get COVID, if you do get sick, if your oxygen gets below 90%, then you need to call somebody and that may be, you know, an alert that you're getting into trouble. If you're not, then you're probably better off at home. That's been the advice. And so, yeah, we take our oxygen once a week and just have a baseline of what your saturation is, because that's like a silent indicator that you're starting to get into trouble as your oxygen goes down. Again, the News and Observer, I really like the coverage that they're doing. They have a coronavirus section every day, and I really subscribe to the Durham County Health COVID notifications, and I really like the advice and expertise I've seen from Mandy Cohen from the state. So I was only going to talk a little bit, and I wasn't going to go through all of the stuff, but I guess I got so going, like I just started going. So again, these slides are there for a resource, and it shows you where to go to kind of keep up with things, and you can go back and review some of the terminology so you know what they're talking about. And with that, I'll answer questions, sort of.
One thing is that we will be posting this meeting with all this information up on the on our NCNARFE.org website. Jane, this is something that you and I have talked about before, and that's ivermectin. And a fellow over in Australia just sent me something that said that there was a clinician in Bangladesh who was using a combination of ivermectin and doxycycline, I think it is. It's an antibiotic. And could you go over just briefly a little bit about it? Because I know that you had mentioned it before in your talk. And anyway.
Well, there is, I'll go back to active, and the slide that said progress, it said 170 therapeutics, and then they had 39 agents they prioritized for review, and then 6 of them were, and this includes plasma from people who are recovered to try to help as a therapeutic, Resmetirom, which I talked about last month, which may help decrease the symptoms. I don't know about the mortality was not real significantly changed, but it certainly helped people get out of the hospital and recover faster. But there's just so many things that are out there that hydroxychloroquine was one of them, of like, theoretically, could they work this way or that way? I've seen everything from yak blood to, this morning I was looking at the Kentucky Farm Bureau, and they were saying they were using tobacco to try to generate antibodies or antigens for COVID. And there's a lot of things out there, but I would really defer to the active process for people to really look at the science and the efficacy, and is this something that we're going to try? Yes, if you've got somebody, and this was especially true in a serious situation where I'm just going to try some things and I'll see if they work. You really need to test it, not just have anecdotes of like, yeah, I gave it to this guy and he lived, but would he have lived or died anyway, no matter what I did? In fact, they had a thing this morning in Lancet from a Chinese commentary of like, be careful if you're using too much steroid to try to decrease the inflammation, because our experience in China is that we have some unintended side effects of that if you're using that in COVID patients. So I just not sure about the plethora of things that you may read about that may or may not work on the therapeutic side. But the thing that does work to help protect us is not to breathe on each other and wash your hands. I was asked about the CDC guidelines about what about we don't think it's spread by surfaces as easily, and maybe not as easily, but that doesn't mean you still shouldn't wash your hands and do what you feel, comfortable with. The main thing is if you're with somebody who sneezes or they're breathing heavy or they're singing, I'm sure you all seen all the reports of a church congregation that had choir practice and somebody came in with it and infected 52 people and 3 people died. What can you do to decrease your exposure, but you still need to be able to get on, with your life? I do want to mention my dentist. I went to the dentist last week. I had a crown that had cracked and it had been sitting there for 2 months. And my dentist opened up a week and a half ago. And what they did to open up is there's no waiting room. You go to the parking lot and you call up and you go in when they come and get you and they open the door. You must have a mask on. You go through what was the waiting room and you go into your room, and your dentist and hygienist have level 3 PPE, the gowns, an N95, a surgical mask, and you are supposed to wear a mask. And they asked me beforehand, had I been anywhere, had I been sick, and they did a thermometer check. I felt safe going there. And there was a study, from Belgium that was talked about with in this American College of Environmental Medicine, where they looked at spread between physicians, between patients and physicians, and they concluded if you are wearing proper PPE, it will protect that spread between the doctor and you and between you and the doctor. So I felt comfortable doing that, but Tom is going to Duke for treatments, and we're doing things with telemedicine and trying to be safe. So I know that wasn't exactly specific to your question. I refer you back to the active process for that, but I did want to throw that stuff out.
I appreciate that. And I just came across this thing. Can you see it? It started off with a study of the Zika virus. Does that show up on your screens?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. The important takeaway is they're calling this the information out there as an infodemic, and it says that there's 5 measures to prevent the spread of misinformation. Be critical when you look at social media. And what I've said about ivermectin and doxychlorocycline could be classified in that. And it says be critical when you look at social media. Don't leave false information in your online networks. You can politely ask the person who shared it to remove it. Report the false information to the platform administrators. And when in doubt, take the time to verify the shared information. There's so much that is being thrown out there, and some of it has an edge or a political or financial agenda behind it, and make more noise than people who share false information. And anyway, it's something to think about when going about and looking at things. And there are times that I've gone on Snoops and urban legend type sites to verify things that have been sent to me by people, and it turns out that a lot of it's false. It sounds funny, it sounds cute, or it sounds important, but it isn't. And I think if we make the effort to limit the information going around, the better off we're all going to be.
Peter, I would add that just this weekend, NSA, I think, or one of those ilks, basically looked at like 50% of some of the information on COVID that's going around, and it's virally, no pun intended, and 50% of it is being generated by bots, and they think from Russia and from China. Just like to sow misinformation and discord. I'm sorry, but just like in the election, COVID is being used that way too. By the way, Russia is in dire straits over this as well. The newest outbreak in northern China, they think, came from Russia. And I don't think it takes a great leap of imagination to realize that once this thing hits developing countries like Sao Paulo in Brazil and Africa and the Indian subcontinent, that it can be a pretty dire situation.
One of the things I think we need to do is to realize that we shouldn't be fighting each other, but we need to be fighting a virus.
That's true. And you wear the mask to protect other people, and it helps for you not to spread it. I think besides the oximeter, Tom and I got these two sun hats that has a Velcro plastic shield on it, so that if we have to go in and out of a doctor's office or someplace where somebody can be sneezing or whatever, it's a face shield. It just Velcros on. Like, people can get real, creative about ways to protect themselves, but need to wear a mask. And I saw the pictures this weekend of mass gatherings. There were 4,000 people evidently in Alamance County. Hardly any were wearing a mask in close proximity. And as you saw from the how long does it take, well, to get it, we may be seeing people with the disease in 2 to 3 weeks after this. That's the thing, is what you see today reflects what happened 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, my wife went to for a physical exam, and the doctor told her he expects to see a second spike or wave coming on through. And really appreciate your report on this. This is very timely, and thank you.
And I wanted to ask Jane a question. You talked about a pulse ox. What oxygen percentage did you say?
Usually what they're recommending is if your oxygen falls below 90%, then you should consider going to the hospital. The risks of going to the hospital are less than the risks of staying at home with it. Now, I have to tell a funny story on poor Tom. When I first put the oximeter on him, he held his breath, and I saw his oxygen start to tank. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And I said, breathe, Tom, breathe. And then it went right back up. So don't forget to breathe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was curious
Jane?
about what that percentage level was. I do oxygen at night all the time, and I have found a couple of times when I start some of the coughing spells, which I've had recently, that my oxygen helped. So I just put it on sometime during the day and take a nap. And when I get up, I feel better. But
well, what I'm into personally is like, just know what your numbers and normal is for you. Like, I'm doing I have infrared thermometer, so I do our foreheads, so I can see like what's your normal temperature, because it's not 88.6, so that you know when you have a fever, and the same thing for your oximeter, like what's normal for you, so that if you see
Sure.
something abnormal, you know what normal is for you.
Right. Well, we've had a few doctor's appointments recently where we've had virtual, where the doctor is there with a video like we are here. And also, we had to go into one of the clinics last week, and they tried a thermometer on our temple and, you know, talked about masks and that kind of thing. But we didn't have any temperature, so they let us go through. So as of that moment, I guess we were free of.
Well, the way they talk about the thermometer thing, as I said, if you've got, I think the CDC is saying 35% asymptomatic, and I've seen some studies that up to 50%. That means you don't have a temperature yet. So if all you're going to do is screen with just a temperature, it's not good enough. Doesn't mean you don't have COVID. But
Sure.
if you have a temperature, well, there's a red flag. You're like, you know, that's why they ask you questions. Who have you been around?
Well, thank you very, very much for your very, very thorough report. I appreciate it very much, and I'm sure all of our members do as well. I look forward to finding it on the website and reading it at my leisure. And I appreciate getting the slides ahead of time too. But
Yeah,
we thank you.
This is a snapshot in time. The last 2 pages, the resource page, keep that as a reference so that you can go to these trusted sources of information and see what the news is. Without being overloaded with the daily stuff, it gets to be much.
Sure. Yeah.
And Mary, I was noticing you I had a question about how much does an oximeter cost?
Well,
And if
I had 2 questions. My first question was that I go for an annual physical tomorrow. So when they do the screening, should I ask for pulse oximetry? Because I don't think they normally do that. But since I don't own an oximeter, I was wondering, should I ask for that to get a baseline?
Yes,
Well,
of course.
yeah, that does, you know, I'm not going to second guess your position. As I said, this was something, if you look at some of the News Observer coronavirus things that you can have in your pharmacy, you know, certainly acetaminophen and things like that, and they recommended an oximeter. I got mine from Amazon. I think it was like, actually I got 2, one for Tom and one for me, in case one poops out. or the other thing is if one of us gets it, we would isolate from each other in the house. It was, I think, around $60. As things become more popular, I think, I was talking to my son yesterday about cameras for my computer so that I can do Zoom. Well, now there's been a run on those. He says it's hard to get a camera. Well, I got a really fancy camera about 3 weeks ago, and it took me a while. I got an infrared thermometer, the kind that you point, and that had to be, I got that from Amazon too, and that took me a month to get because it had to be shipped from China. But
There's a
doing this a while, so
there's a range of prices on oximeters. Most of them are around $40. The ones that get 5-star ratings from a lot of people, but you can get them all the way up to 69, 70, 80 bucks. I was actually looking at one that costs about 70 bucks that has a Bluetooth function and will actually store all of the readings on my smartphone if I want to, keep check. So it's just a matter of, how technical you want to get. I have an EKG machine that stores all of my EKGs daily on my smartphone, in addition to my blood pressure readings. So I'm into storing all that information. Then I can just send an email to my doctor and say, you know, here are all my readings from the last month that I want to. So it's all you know, and how much you want to spend and how technical you want to get. But
And we're going
Amazon's
to
got
have more and more of these kinds of devices will be available just at your regular drugstores. You know, I see.
yeah.
I saw maybe 6 or 8, 10 different pulse ox meters at CVS. You know, and as you said, the prices range up to, you know, from up to about 70 or something like that. Amazon has them a little bit cheaper, but I got a watch from Amazon, which does blood pressure and oxygen and all kinds of things. And I add the blood sugar there too, because I'm a type 1 diabetic. So I'm all in for checking things and keeping a record and letting your doctor know. So
There's also a medical supply store on the corner of Carver and Guest Road, and I would assume that they have oximeters there too. So it's another.
Yeah, their prices unfortunately are very high. I found there.
Okay.
But anyway,
Well,
Amazon.
Yeah,
The good thing
Peter,
about Amazon.
I'm sorry,
think-
I just don't go anywhere. I order crap on Amazon
Yeah.
because I don't want to go anywhere. I don't want to go into a retail place.
Yeah, let them bring it to you, and if you don't like it, and if you have Amazon Prime, you send it back for free.
Well, and the
Right.
other thing with Amazon is when I look at what Amazon Prime, you know, recommends, but I look at the reviews. Like when I did the oximeters and just all sorts of stuff, I will read all the reviewers and the reviews.
Right.
I don't want to get a dud.
Peter, do we have a way of knowing how many people are on our call? Or
Yeah, we've had. I think we've been up as high as 14 people have come on and gone off. So I think somewhere around 14, 15. It's not, you know, it's not great, but it's not bad. So
well, again, thank you very, very much, Jane. And I wanted to go on with our meeting if there are no more questions for Jane.
Good job, Jane. Thank you.
thank you very much.
You're welcome. Stay
Thank you.
safe, stay informed.
A lot of good work here. Appreciate it.
We appreciate it, yes. I don't know if there are any other committee reports that we want to have today. I can tell you there's a little bit of a breakthrough in some of the AMS data. Yesterday, we were able to get an M112 report for a very long time, and it shows some things about membership that I haven't been able to access since May of 2019. So I was happy to see that. Do I have anybody who needs to make a report or wants to make a report?
Treasurer's report, we're solvent. Just a slight decrease in funds and a little bit more in expenditures, but we're doing good. I'll get a final report out to you probably sometime today and send it on out
Okay.
to the board.
That'll be fine. I wanted also to give you all a few highlights. I don't know how many of you tied into the May 6th meeting, which was held by video conference like this, with help from Peter and Henry Bradley and just so many people all around. We had about an 8-hour day of conference. Some of the highlights had to do with the presentation of the awards. Durham did get the Alzheimer's Award again. I was recognized as the top recruiter in North Carolina with 18 new members
And
so far. Those were not all from Durham, because when Frank and I went to Fayetteville, North Carolina, we recruited 9 people for a chapter down in that area. So they weren't all Durham people, but a NARFE member is a NARFE member, and they bring in revenues, so it doesn't matter where they are or what state or county they live in. So we were pleased about that. Peter, I may need your help here. I've forgotten who got the award, the Tom Hobgood Award. Do you?
I know that Henry received one. It's
Tom Hobgood, I think went to Charles Talley, but I'm not sure. And the Lyle Storch Award went to Robert from Roxborough, Robert Allen. There were wonderful videos. Some of them kind of fizzled right near the end, and they will be reproduced and put out to us sometime in the future. But that was the first time we'd ever had an annual meeting by video.
And there were I think Henry said there were something like about 133 people who attended by the internet. So that was well attended.
Right. Also, I can tell you that FedCon, which is the biannual national meeting, which was to be in Scottsdale, Arizona, near the end of August this year, has been canceled. So anybody who paid for FedCon will get their money back. They're in the process of doing that. But they have been able to secure the Scottsdale, Arizona hotel for 2022. And they also were able to get the hotel in St. Louis to host FedCon 24, which would be happening August of 24. That's a long time to think out, but anyway, because of the virus, they just didn't feel that it was worth the time to have it in Arizona and the danger that we might all face. So I don't have membership report for you, but I will have that up to date very soon. Are there any other reports that we have for today? Did Dave Salmon go, or I guess he did. Did anybody get any feedback about sending our newsletter out in email? Tom, did you get any?
No.
Tom Link? I heard him.
No, I haven't. There have been a number of people that have actually looked at it on the Facebook page. I think something like 17 people have looked at it on the Facebook page.
Well, that's good.
Okay.
I had a question. How is Bullock's doing?
Bullock's is open for takeout only right now.
Yeah, but I mean financially and, you know.
Well, I dropped in there one day last week and there was a long line of people waiting for food. But only the immediate family is working. They don't have their regular waitresses and people who are normally there every day. So I think they're having a hard time, but they're looking forward to having us back and opening up. They were not sure last week when that was going to happen, how that was going to happen. However, they have put up plexiglass around the cashiers so that you're not real close to the cashiers. But they plan to do whatever the governor recommends was what I was told, I think either Thursday or Friday of last week. but they'll be happy to have us back, and I'm sure they're going to do whatever they can to accommodate us whenever. But I don't know specifically how they're doing. Any other announcements or discussion? Or I did want to mention that I've spoken with Beulah Latta a few times. She's been in very, very poor shape since January. But at 98 years old, I think she's doing very well. She has been able to leave the pavilion, which is the intensive care area of Crowsdale, and is back in her own apartment. I've talked with her a couple of times, and she is looking forward to getting better and getting back to us. And so she is going to get better. So I think that she's been able to go back to her apartment is a good sign.
Yeah.
I don't know how much help she has there. She may have 24/7 care. I just don't know. She did not sound very strong, and I did not stay with her very long in terms of what was happening. Mary, do we have any plans for our next meeting in June? Or I know we've been a bit up in the air and a bit wishy-washy here.
I was just looking at the list of proposed speakers, and I had on schedule for June 23rd someone from the OSHA Lifelong Learning Center, but I had also let them know that we had canceled out face-to-face meetings, so I would have to, touch base with them again. I was also wondering, should I contact Sonja Smith and see if she would like to speak to us virtually in one of our virtual meetings? She had expressed a desire to come at a time other than when she gave the update.
Right.
So those are two possibilities, but I would need to make contact.
Okay. Well, I think that we probably need to wait just a little while. I'll check with Bullocks sometime next week. I think what the governor has said is if by June the 1st, they could open some of the restaurants and with the precautions, but I'm not sure. I'll check with them and get back with you.
Carolyn,
Yes, Jane.
Carolyn, I asked about Bullocks just to see how they're doing, but think carefully about if the governor and Durham says, okay, you can open up 50% of your restaurant or just whatever, the logistics of having a susceptible population such as ourselves in an enclosed room in a buffet.
And
Okay.
spacing.
What
Oh, Jane,
did
I wanted to just tell you also that your COVID presentation is on Facebook, and 8 people have looked at that on Facebook, and also the Maryland NCNARFE Federation gave you a thumbs up saying that they liked it.
Oh, great. Great.
Hopefully I didn't say anything terrible.
No, you did a great job, Jane. This is Mary Vickers, wanting to thank you for speaking and to let you know that I thought you gave a very detailed report and the information was very timely.
Thank you.
Helpful. Very helpful.
Timely up until today. Today's news.
Yeah.
Actually, I was looking at Lancet 30 minutes before my talk to see what was on it.
Well, I tell you, I'm a big fan of Fauci. I think he tells the truth. I worked at NIH until I retired, and I really like it when he's in the picture, and I believe anything he says. But I think he's under a lot of pressure right now, as is the other person. I think they put up with some things that they have to put up with in order to stay somewhere in the good graces of Trump so that they can still try to help us. in some way. And so I think there's a lot of pressure on Fauci and on Birx, but I do believe what they tell us. And,
My doctor says don't believe anything, but listen to Fauci.
right.
What you got.
Right.
And I was just wondering, what do you think about Burks? I mean, she always seems so guarded in everything she says.
Well, I think she has to stay that way in order to keep the position.
Yeah.
And they probably can do more help with where they are than if they get just kicked off the committee completely. She seems to have a way of talking that doesn't put Trump in orbit. Fauci seems to put him in orbit, but you know, I'm not sure. I'm glad they're there and can give us some information. Okay, so we want to proceed cautiously with bullets. So I take that to mean, Jane, that you would prefer to do meetings like the one we're doing today until we can be a little more sure and that we'd be safe.
That's exactly what I'm saying. That's exactly what I'm saying. This is going to go on for a long time. And I think we're going to have a second, personally, I think we're going to have a second wave after the people got out this weekend and infected people. And I think we're going to be looking at months. We can't wait for a vaccine, but I hope that there'll be therapeutics out there that can help you when you get in trouble, and that you can take care of yourself and put off getting this thing and not get it when we're in the middle of flu season or in the middle of a peak. And so the later that you get it in the course of this, the better. Yeah, I miss going out. I miss playing music for people. I miss seeing people, but I don't want to be somewhere where I'm worried that I'm there. I was not worried being at the dentist, but if I was in a restaurant, in a dining room situation, I would be worried.
Yeah, it's hard to get 5 to 6 feet away from people and going through the buffet line and all those kinds of things. It's very scary.
I'll throw something facetious out here. Maybe we could meet in a parking lot and bring our own sandwiches.
Well,
a speaker system, you know. Tailgate. There you go. As long as
we
our tailgates are further than 6 feet apart.
Go to Duke Gardens. Go to Duke Gardens or something. Well, I do miss the personal face-to-face contact with everybody, but I can live with this. I think I hope we can get more and more people involved. That 14, I guess, is about half of what we would normally have at a meeting. So,
well, yeah, Mary too. You got some people that, like Tom and me, we count as two. We have one video, but there's two.
Right, we're two too. We're using the same system, so and we may have more than we realize there. So, now I don't have anything else for today. If you all do, let's hear it.
I don't have anything. I'll make a motion to end the meeting.
And I want to thank you, Peter, for all of your hard work and effort and putting this all together for us. I really, really do appreciate it.
Well,
I'm in favor of it, but I wouldn't have a clue as to how to set it up myself and how to carry it off. And you do that so very, very well.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Thank you, Peter.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And
As
thank
far
you,
as I'm
Jay.
concerned, it's sort of like the old aircraft I used to fly on, and they said it was a bunch of nuts and bolts flying in loose formation, and there are days that it feels just like that. But thank you very much.
See you guys later.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Thank
Stay
you
safe,
so much,
y'all. Stay
everybody.
safe.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.